We're going to start 9.2 notes, which is on parallelograms and triangles. There's going to be a few things that I need to explain to you. There's a few things I need to explain to you about heights and bases. Bases and heights have to be perpendicular to each other. This is like my most important thing I can get across to you in this section. Bases and heights have to be perpendicular to each other. I'm hoping you remember what that word perpendicular means. If you do not know what it means, then you should write out what it means off to the side. What does perpendicular mean? Do you remember? Makes a 90-degree angle. Makes a 90-degree angle. You could say it makes a right angle. Same thing. So it's super important that your base and your height are perpendicular to each other. That there's a right angle between your base and your height. So that leads us to what the formula is for the area of a parallelogram. The area of a parallelogram is base times height. I'm going to highlight that. That's it. Riley, keep it down, please. Riley, keep it down, please. So now, the area of a parallelogram formula is the exact same formula as another shape that you've already done. And there is a connection between this formula and the one you did before. What shape did we cover in 9.1? Do you remember? And what was else with the circle? Squares and rectangles. So let me show you something. I'm going to draw something here. I'm going to draw a parallelogram. I'm going to try to make this as accurate as I possibly can. And here's my parallelogram. A parallelogram has this side is the same length as this side, and the right side is the same length as the left side. They are two parallel sides. That's why it's called a parallelogram. If I think about a rectangle shape, I'm going to draw you a dotted line here. Dot, 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 straight down. And I'm going to make a right angle symbol right here like this. I want you to imagine if you were to take this part, this triangle piece right here. I'm going to highlight it in yellow. If I were to take scissors and I were to cut that yellow piece, and I were to cut it off of this parallelogram and I were to slide it over here, would it fit perfectly over on this side and fill that in and make a shape? What shape would it be? And guess what the formula for the area of a rectangle is? Same one. Base times height. So that is the reason why the parallelogram formula is the same formula as the rectangle. With that being said, now I need you to understand how to tell certain things apart. I'm going to do number 3. Here's number 3. just change that to number 3. And number 3 has a spot here, and this is, okay, well, let me draw it how it is on number 3. Dot, 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 dot. Here's this, here's that. And this is 2.5. This is not to scale. This is 5.2 inches. And this is 4.8 inches. Now, they have 3 different numbers here. I'll zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. There's a 5.2, there's a 2.5, and there's a 4.8. Earlier, I told you you need to make sure that your base and your height are perpendicular to each other. So on this whole worksheet, there are going to be problems that, or there's going to be information that you do not need. There are distractors there. A distractor is something that is there to trick you and take you away from the correct answer. So let's look at this. The base is defined as one of the sides of the parallelogram. If I were to do a base, you can do this as the base. Let me highlight it. This orange piece, that can be a base, or this can be a base. It doesn't matter. Which means that the bottom or the top, since they are the same, I could use that as the base, or I could use that as the base. The height is always perpendicular to the base. So when I'm looking at perpendicular height, it's going to be the one that is next to that right angle symbol. Do you see a right angle symbol?
Yeah.
There's 2 of them. I didn't mean to draw this one. There's this one. This, because it's next to it, this right angle symbol, this has to be your height. Okay? So I want to write a little note to myself. The height is always next to the right angle symbol. The height is always next to the right angle symbol. So if that's my height, then what I need to do is figure out which base is perpendicular to this pink line. Do you know which one is perpendicular to the pink one? What's perpendicular to it? What distance, which base is perpendicular to this height? What do you think? The 2.5. This one and this one are perpendicular to each other. Even though the right angle symbol is down here, don't forget up here it's also a right angle since they're parallel lines. That's something that we're going to learn. So if I was to work out this problem, it would be A equals 2.5 times 4.8. And I don't expect you to do that in your head. I would expect you to do that on a calculator. So I'm going to get out my trusty calculator. 2.5 times 4.8. Let me put that where you can see it. 2.5 times 4.8 is 12. And this is inches times inches, which would be 12 inches squared. That's our area of number 3. So why did they put the 5.2 there? To confuse you. It's there to distract you. You would only use the 5.2 if there was a perpendicular to that base. And sometimes your perpendicular is inside the parallelogram, sometimes it's outside. Don't freak out if the perpendicular height is outside of your shape. Okay, so that brings us to a harder problem, like number 5. Here's number 5. Number 5 has a kind of a funky drawing, but I'll draw a quick one for you. parallelogram. And then there's a perpendicular over here. And then there is and it says this is 3. It says this is 8. It says this is 4. And this is H. It's a crazy drawing. And it's going to say find H. So I'm highlighting here the parallelogram. The parallelogram has this 3, this 8, and this 4. So I should be able to figure out what the area of this parallelogram is. Let me first write out that I know what the area of the parallelogram is. It is base times height, right? Like that's what it's going to be. Which one's my base? Which one's my height of this parallelogram? And I remember the height and the base have to be perpendicular to each other. There has to be that right angle between the two numbers. Some of these numbers you're going to use, some of them you're not going to use. Which two numbers are we going to use?
3 and 8.
If you said 3 and 8, you are correct. Now, I don't want you to do anything yet. Don't solve that. 8 times 3, I guess you could figure out what that is. That is 24, right? Well, that should be equal to something. This parallelogram, if I'm using the 3 and the 8, this is the base and this is the height, that's going to find the area of this orange parallelogram. Well, there's a second way we can find it. We could find it by doing the 3 times 8, or we could do this base. Is there a perpendicular to the 4? What's perpendicular to the 4? So this 4 times that 8 should equal the same area, believe it or not. Because we could cut this and then take that triangle and fill in the gap. So that means that this base times height should equal the other base times height, and this other base is 4, and this other height is h. So how are we going to figure out what h is? We're going to set up an equation where we use these two pieces, this base and this height, is equal to this base and this height times each other. See how the base times height equals 3 times 8. This other base is 4 times h. Should equal the same thing. What? 4h equals 24. Do you know what h has to be? That's how numbers 5, 6, and 7 are going to be done. This is just like 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to put that down next to the 5 so that you know how to set them up. What you're doing is setting up two area problems and setting them equal to each other because it's the same parallelogram. It's the same area. Now that brings us to triangles. Area of a triangle. The formula for the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. This formula is very similar to the parallelogram formula, except there's this 1/2 that's in front. So that must mean that they are related somehow, and I want to show you a quick picture of how come. Let me draw you just a quick little sketch over here of a rectangle. You know how to find the area of this rectangle. It is base times height, right? Well, the way that I can come up with the area of a triangle is to create a diagonal right down the middle like that. And instead of me finding all of the area of the base times the height, what I could do is I can find just the area of this diagonal and below. And what is that? That looks just like a shape that you know already. What is this shape?
Triangle.
It's a triangle. And how much of this rectangle is it? That's where this formula comes from. It's half of the base times the height. As a matter of fact, you could even do this and have the same rectangle and put a point anywhere in the middle or 3/4 of the way. And if you were to take this shape, and you would still have half if you took this piece, cut it, and reflected it right there. And this piece right there, it's still half of that base times the height. So that's our formula. Let me highlight it because I'm going to use that again. I'm going to use that often. Same thing, they have to be perpendicular to each other. And one other little note that I put underneath here is do not distribute the 1/2. Do not distribute the 1/2. It multiplies either the base or the height a lot of students think that because there's this half has to go to both of these things, and it doesn't. There's no plus sign, there's no minus sign. This is not over addition or subtraction. It's all multiply. So you either do half of the B or you do half of the H, but you don't do half of B and half of H. Unless you do B times H and then take half of that, that's okay. If you do it, or you only take it half once. That's the whole idea. Take half once. Half only once. Only once. One time. Okay? So that brings us to an example. I'm going to give you example number 8. Number 8 looks like this. I'll do a quick sketch. 6 feet, 10 feet, 7.8 feet, 5 feet, 8 feet. .8 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet, 8 feet. So if I'm using this formula, which is 1/2 base times height, then I need to find the base and the height that are perpendicular to each other. So do you see a right angle symbol somewhere? Do you know which one the height is going to be? Which one's the height?
6 feet.
You said 6. You are correct. I'm going to put it here in pink. Do you know which one the base is going to be? 13, 5 plus 8, same thing. They have to be, it's the full base. We got to have both of those two things together. So when I do the base, it's not just 5, it's not just 8, it's that full distance, it's 13. You could put 5 plus 8, but I'm going to put 13. And so my formula is area of the triangle is 1/2 13 times 6. 1/2 13 times 6. Now here's the shortcut that I use, and I use it a lot. Remember what I said. You don't 1/2 both of these things. You only do it to one. Can you do half of 13? Yes, but it'll be a decimal. Can you do half of 6? Does that come out nice and even?
Yep.
Then I would do it where whichever one's easier, do half of that. Whichever one's easier. What's half of 6? And since you've done that once, now you just do 3 times 13. And some of you might be able to do that in your head. If not, do it on a calculator. And I'm getting 39. What are units? Feet what?
Squared.
It's feet squared. That's what it should be. So we'll do one last example and then we'll be done. Sometimes you're going to have to do things a little bit differently, and I'll do number 16 with you. 16 looks like this. And it has an arrow and an arrow. And it has an arrow and an arrow. Arrow, arrow, dot, 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 perpendicular, 10 inches, 10 inches, 14 inches is from here to here. And it says, find the area of each figure. You have two different shapes in this picture. We have a parallelogram and we have a triangle. Now, a couple of things I want you to know about that I don't know if I've ever explained to you, or it may not have been explained to you. See this little triangle and this little triangle? They're filled in on your worksheet. And what they mean is that these two are parallel to these two. They're going in the same direction. If it has a single, then it means that this one is parallel to this one. It's letting you know you can assume this is a parallelogram. Okay? That allows you to know a couple different things. Now you know it's a parallelogram. Now you know which one the base and the height is of the parallelogram side. It also lets you know that there is a height or an altitude of this triangle. What's the height of the triangle that's not in this picture?
10 inches.
I agree with Jason. Because this 10 from this base to that base is going to be the same from this base to that one right there. So what I would do if I were you is I would find the area of the parallelogram and add the area of the triangle. That's what I'm going to write. Area of a parallelogram plus area of the triangle. Yes?
Is it the area of each shape by itself or the whole figure together?
Well, that's what we're going to find. That's what this would be equal to. So that means I'm going to do the formula for the area of a parallelogram. I'm hoping you know what it is. What's the formula for it? Okay, and what's the base of the parallelogram? Which base are we going to use? Just because I say the word base, don't assume it means the bottom. It just means whichever one, whichever side is perpendicular to its height. This side is perpendicular to this. So this was going to be the base this time. Think that you could rotate it. It's 10. The height is 10. And we're going to add the area of the triangle. The formula for the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. What's the base in this case? And what's the height that's perpendicular to the 14?
10.
If you want, you can plug this whole thing into your calculator, but most of you can do this in your head. 10 times 10? Now, what's easier, half of 14 or half of 10? It's up to you. I would probably make the bigger number smaller. Half of 14 is?
7.
Then times that by 10.
70.
And that would make
170
inches squared. Let's stop your notes right there.